Do you remember Are You Afraid of the Dark? It was a 90s series on Nickelodeon that they played on Saturday night as part of their Snick lineup. And honestly, I was a little kid watching this growing up, and it terrified me. I mean, if you think about it, back in the 90s, we didn't really have the internet as much as we do now, so if somebody told you a ghost story, you had no way to fact check or disprove it. There was no Snopes back then. For those of you who haven't seen it, Are You Afraid of the Dark is about a group of teenagers who meet in the woods to tell each other spooky stories. The group of teens calls themselves the Midnight Society, and each week a new member takes turns trying to scare the other kids, or at least scare the kids watching at home like me. It's kind of like the Twilight Zone or Black Mirror, but for a tween audience. So without further ado, I submit to you, members of the Fangirl Society, my review for my opinion of the top 7 episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Number 7.
The Tale of the Whispering Walls.
Babysitter is out with her 2 charges when they break down in front of this creepy old house, and being in the 90s and no one having a cell phone yet, the babysitter had to get out of the car and go knock on the door of said creepy house. Except, she doesn't come back. When they realize they can't find their babysitter, the kids run back to a tavern they saw down the road, only to discover that it's basically full of ghosts. And after realizing that the danger is imminent, they go back to rescue their babysitter, and they only succeed because of the help of one of the tavern ghosts.
She's so like my poor little Jane.
But no!
What I like about this episode is the general spooky nature of everything in it. We have the haunted house, the haunted bar, the extremely creepy fixtures, especially the one that the main villainous ghost takes over, like, ugh, haunt my dreams much? And really, I find it to be a fun concept that the kids would have totally lost in this scenario if not for the other ghosts stepping in. So, even though this episode is a pretty typical ghost story, it still has enough creativity, like the spirits being upset by a breeze, that I put it solidly at number 7 on the list. Moving on to number 6.
The Tale of the Hatch.
Basically, 2 kids get put into a boarding school where things are just a little bit off. They're not allowed to listen to music, they get given this really weird, gross-looking dessert that they call sponge, and then guess what? Lo and behold, something sinister's happening here, and while that part is really obvious, the actual twist of what was going on was something I couldn't guess. And as it turned out, the people that ran the school were actually lizard people using the kids as slave labor to churn their eggs? Hey, I'm giving this one points for creativity, not necessarily the best story ever. I also really like when we get to see some of the reptilian skin because it's layered over their hand to make it look sort of extra real. I mean, okay, it's really cheesy by today's standards, but for a TV show from Canada in the mid-90s, that's a pretty high-tech effect, and it really makes you feel unsettled to see it as a kid because you see the layering and it does make you kind of question your reality. Number 5.
The Tale of the 13th Floor.
This one made my list because I really like the concept, even though the colors and some of the props in the background are really hokey. But the story goes that there's this brother and sister who find out a toy factory moves in on the 13th floor of their apartment building. The sister, and only the sister, gets invited to come up and do product testing. But because the sister is kind of a chicken and she's really nervous to go, she gets her brother to go with her, and even though the toy factory doesn't love that, they let him do it, and it's the first time that the sister gets to be better than her brother at something, so she's like really empowered and she really likes this place. But of course there has to be a twist, and here the twist is they're aliens who want to abduct the sister and take her up in their spaceship. The sister gets away and even saves her brother, but then it's revealed that she's actually one of the aliens too. Somehow her family says they forgot her on Earth and they can only return every 10 years, so now she has to wait until she's 20 to go home. It was one of the first times where my perceptions of good and evil really got called into question, and I had to say, well wait, they weren't bad aliens, it was just a situation nobody understood. Of course no one understood it because no one was talking about it directly, but that's a whole different issue we're not going to tackle today. Number 4.
The Tale of the Dollmaker.
Actually, the title for this one is kind of confusing because I don't know who the Dollmaker is supposed to be. Is it the house? Is it the dollhouse? Is it one of the girls or the aunt? I don't know. I don't get it. This is one of the stories that really got under my skin and freaked me out as a kid. Here we have a little girl going to stay with her aunt and uncle, and she wants to go play with her friend next door that's always been there, except she's not. The girl disappeared, her family moved out of the house, and the aunt is taking care of the place for the family in case the daughter ever returns. The protagonist gets drawn back into the attic over and over again, and the creepy dollhouse up there keeps beckoning to her, sometimes even convincing her to go through a door that leads to nowhere. After being stopped multiple times, the main character gets through the big door and ends up inside the dollhouse. If that isn't creepy enough, she finds her missing friend, who's not only turning into a porcelain doll, but our failed rescuer herself is also turning into a doll. After having to call on some inner strength, the girls do make it out of there and back into the real world, and hopefully somebody burns that house to the ground in the aftermath. But even though the makeup does look a little silly, this whole concept of being turned into something against your will while you're trapped was so frightening to me as a kid that this episode stuck with me forever. I think it actually did make me afraid of the dark. Number 3.
The Tale of the Closet Keepers.
To really compress and simplify this story, it's about a boy who can hear and a girl who cannot, and they get abducted by aliens and trapped in a zoo for people where sound is what keeps them all in, so of course being deaf is what saves the day. The story isn't revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination, but what I did really like was that it was the first time I ever saw somebody doing sign language in a show, and I think that touch makes it extra captivating because you're not only listening, but you're looking really hard and trying to pay attention and understand. So this episode, more than others, keeps your eyes wide open and you're very attentive more so to the details because of it. And to not only include a deaf girl, but to include the discrimination she faces every day was a really powerful, eye-opening thing. And I think because of the sign language, it actually made this episode stick in my mind more than a lot of others. So when people say, "Are you afraid of the dark?" this is the episode that comes to mind every time. Now you're coming into the end. We're at number 2 for my best episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And taking second place is
The Tale of the Midnight Madness.
The concept for this one was really interesting, especially back in the 90s. We have this crazy, creepy old guy who shows up in this dying movie theater and says, "Here, play my movie and you'll get a full house." And yeah, that's exactly what happens. We have no idea really why though. And the movie's a hit until, well, the vampire escapes the film and starts going after people. The 2 teenage ushers have to go in and save the day, and yes they do, so it's a pretty cut and dry story in that regard. But what sells this episode more than anything else is Dr. Vink.
Dr. Fink?
Vink, with a v.
Dr. Vink is one of the very few recurring characters we see throughout any episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Midnight Society excluded, of course. And the actor that plays Vink is so into his role. He just sucks you in and makes you want to see more with his high energy crazy. Honestly, Dr. Vink is such a great character. He's zany, he's crazy, he's a little mean, and no one understands his motives, so it's so much fun to watch him just enjoy himself on screen. But Dr. Vink aside, I really like that they used Nosferatu as the main demon of this movie. It's a really great way to kind of take a younger audience and shove them into the classic movies, and it's a lot of fun, this whole concept of the monster coming out to get you. But it's not just that Nosferatu comes out, but the main protagonist goes into the movie to defeat him, and that was a really cool visual change of pace, as well as a great way to throw this classic movie at a whole new audience of teens and tweens. Alright, you've made it to the end. My number 1 pick for the best episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
The Tale of Watcher's Woods.
What I really like about this episode, holy crap, Kaylee Fry, is that you? Yes, it is a little tiny Kaylee Fry. Let me try to start this again. This episode is about a Girl Scout camp and two girls who go out into Watcher's Woods. I was a Girl Scout growing up. I went to a lot of different campouts over the years, and the Watcher's Woods or Watcher in the Woods was always this big deal concept that would terrify all of us. But again, two girls out in the woods where they shouldn't be, they stumble across these three old women who turn out to be these missing campers that disappeared when they were little girls decades ago. The old ladies take one of the two scouts hostage, and the other one has to go back to retrieve their whistles from the campsite, because without their whistles, these women's souls are stuck for eternity in the Watcher's Woods. The Watcher appears, and he is scary. Maybe not so much by today's standards, but especially back then when you knew the folklore behind it. Woo. But long story short, the three old women get their whistles, blowing them 3 times, signaling for help, and their souls get released from the woods, finally! I personally found this episode to not only be scary and unpredictable, but really interesting and engaging. The old women have gone crazy, but really they're not the villains here. They've done nothing wrong, and the person who did wrong them totally gets blown over in the movie. Like, we don't know where he is, or where he went, or what he's gonna do next. So while the old missing campers are saved, and we assume that the two girls go back unharmed, we see that the Watcher is still very real, and he's still out there. And because of that very creepy element, combined with my nostalgia for scouting, I had no choice but to give this episode my #1 pick. So did your favorite episodes make the list? If not, don't feel too bad. This series went on for 7 seasons, and I only picked 7 episodes. Plus, these are just my personal opinions and in no way influence your ability to enjoy other episodes. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, I declare this list of the Fangirl Society closed. Well, that's all I have for now, but this video's not quite over yet. I get a lot of comments that say, do a theory on this topic, but I've already done those theories. So please consider going to my main channel page and clicking on the video tab so that way you can see everything I've done. You will probably find a lot of things you like that you never even knew that I posted. I want to let you know that I also have 2 other channels, Say Halo Goodbye Gaming and the Fanily Family Vlogs. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to hit subscribe and share. I can use all the help I can get to let other people know that this channel exists. And if you made it this far, leave me a comment that says something like, hey, I made it to the end, and then let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. I can't make any promises, but the more people that request something, the more I can look into it. Okay, well, I love you. I'll see you in the next video.